These last glimpses of a carefree Sandra Cantu could embody Tracy, California at its best. Before the horror of the little girl's murder, a small town where parents could let their children play, confident no harm would come to them.
Anybody care to make a statement?
But that ideal has been shattered. It's Donald Brager's job to care for the dead.
They'll last forever. Bronze takes hundreds of years to deteriorate.
Here at the Tracy Mausoleum, he has drawers full of bronze letters and numbers he uses to memorialize a life. An S for Sandra, a C for Cantu, and dates too close in time.
The years of birth and death, or when they're so close, it just affects you. It's just not a real good thing, and you're just like, person had so much more to live. Just one of those things it's not supposed to be.
It will take time for those who call Tracy home to find their footing again, to put this image behind them. A black suitcase floating in a pond. Inside, the body of Sandra Cantu.
In Tracy, when one of our own was taken like this, a darling little girl, one of our own, it shows that the community comes together.
How are you?
Good to see you.
Mayor Brent Ives has lived in Tracy for 52 years, but this last year has been one of the toughest. Under the glare of the national spotlight, the town has been hit with several bizarre crimes. The Cantu murder and the arrest of her neighbor, Melissa Huckabee, a surgeon charged with sexually molesting his patients, and a former Girl Scout leader accused of abusing a teenage boy who had escaped from her home, a chain padlocked around his ankle.
I think one of the shocking things, Mr. Mayor, is both in the case of the shackled teen and in the Sandra Cantu case, it did involve a neighbor, and it does raise the question, are people paying attention to what's happening right next door to them?
That's an excellent question, and I think it's not only raised the question, but it's raised the awareness of all of us here in town, certainly. These kinds of things are random events. I think we all know that it could happen anywhere. In fact, if it can happen in Tracy, it can happen anywhere.
Tracy was once a farming community, but in the last 2 decades, the population has exploded from 20,000 to 80,000, and now 70% of the residents are commuters.
Who took that photo?
CHERI Matthews is the editor of the Tracy Press. The Cantu murder is the biggest local story it's ever covered.
It's very tense, and every day there's been something that's broken, and the news just seems to be getting worse and worse. So.
And that puts people on edge.
Mm-hmm. Everyone's talking about it, and yet they say we don't want any more bad news, but yet, you can't get away from it.
Unavoidably, people are looking at their neighbors differently.
I think that there are people that are afraid, young mothers, I'm sure, are afraid for their kids, but I don't think it's torn at our fabric at all. I think it's brought us closer together.
That small town feel is what attracted EVELYN TOLBERT to Tracy.
Yeah, I fell in love with this town when I moved here in 1994.
Now on the city council, TOLBERT prides herself on keeping alive the history of Tracy. Every year she puts on a musical featuring the town's past and showcasing its present. TOLBERT says she knows the story of Sandra Cantu will become part of Tracy's history, that it has changed her community, made it lose some of its innocence.
I think we might very well be entering an era where people will realize, and Tracy will have the reputation for being a little overreactive, a little super sensitive when it comes to our kids, because that's really the general feeling in this town now.
I think that we will be able to move on, but we're never going to forget.
For this town, will this story be one of those seminal moments?
It will. It will. It will become part of our history, and people will remember where they were. Children, I'm sure, will remember too, which is sad.
A tough lesson to learn at any age.
I think it takes tragedy to wake people up and shake them a little bit. Say, hey, we need to get back to the basics again, and that's, as a community, bring everybody together and look out for each other.
And that may be Sandra Cantu's legacy to this town. I'm Laura Marquez for Nightline, Tracy, California.